You are welcome to Be Encouraged with Bishop Julius C. Trimble. Bishop Trimble is on a mission to encourage you with the love of Jesus Christ so you can rise to your highest potential. On To Be Encouraged, Bishop Trimble speaks to a discouraged world with a good word on the pandemic, racism, the environment, human sexuality, and the state of the church, with a focus on centering your life on the love of Jesus Christ. Has there ever been a more needed time for an encouraging word to our world? This is your time to rise to your greatest potential and to be encouraged with Bishop Julius C. Trimble. Hello, good people. Welcome to Be Encouraged with Bishop Julius C. Trimble, the podcast where we look to offer an encouraging word to an often discouraged world. Our special guest today on the podcast is Reverend Angelo Mante from the Alive Fort Wayne organization, which has to do with making peace in their community in Fort Wayne. And one particular program they have is the Peacemaker Academy, which is a leadership development program for high school students at Fort Wayne. And a couple of those students are with us today. They are Samantha Morris and Timothy Poindexter. So, Bishop, would you help us welcome these folks to our podcast here today?
Welcome, Angelo and Samantha and Timothy, and thank you for sharing this time with us. We know people will be blessed and encouraged and be enlightened as a result of your sharing. So thank you so very much.
So, Angelo, can you just briefly introduce our two students, yourself and the two students who are with us, and they can say just a word about themselves?
Yeah, I'm Angelo. I'm the executive director of Alive here in Fort Wayne, and to my left is Samantha Morris, and to my right is Timothy Poindexter. They are high school students here in Fort Wayne, and they are part of our Peacemaker Academy this summer.
Well, it's just by way of just a little background here. Angelo, give us just a little bit of context about how Alive Fort Wayne came into being, and then evolved into the Peacemaker Academy. A little context there. Then I want to get a little context from Samantha and Timothy as well. But a little background here.
Sure. So I'm from Fort Wayne, born and raised, but we left to go down to Atlanta back in 2009. I attended Candler School of Theology down there, and we started planting roots after I graduated in Georgia, and we went down with one child, and we had a few more when we were there, and we were planning to stay there for the long term. But in 2016, I got a message early in the morning on September 13th that my first cousin here in Fort Wayne was murdered. He was shot and killed, in fact, just a few blocks from where we're sitting right now. And I didn't have a little brother growing up. He's the closest thing that I had to a little brother. So this is really something that it was devastating. And I had friends that I lost growing up to gun violence, but never a family member. And it's something that even to this day for our family is really difficult, to say the least. He had 3 kids. He was 30 years old when he was killed, and I'm spending some time with his oldest today after the academy. So after that happened, we felt called to move back to Fort Wayne. We prayed about it, and we were already following the trajectory of violence here in the city even before that happened to my cousin. But when that happened, and I came back and I officiated the funeral, and even as I was preaching at the funeral, I knew it was time to come back home. And so the next year we were here in the summer. We moved back in June of 2017, and that first year we spent a lot of time just learning, getting to know other families who've been affected by violence, meeting with churches, pastors, nonprofit leaders, in the community that were trying to do something about this issue of violence and trying to figure out where we fit into that. And so where we started was we were coming alongside families who had been affected by violence, and especially children. There's so many kids in communities everywhere who fall through the cracks, and who've been affected by violence. And so we started coming alongside them, connecting them to resources. We started a support group. But the more that we did that work, the more we felt that we really needed to do more around prevention and intervention, something that would lead to less families needing support like that in the first place. And so we got connected to this Kingian nonviolence network. I went down to Selma for some nonviolence trainings, and through that network, I got connected to this school in Chicago that was doing some really cool work around nonviolence education in their school in the North Lawndale neighborhood. And so out of that emerged this vision for a Peacemaker Academy. They were making a huge difference in their school and reducing violence. And so we said, hey, why not here? Let's try something here in Fort Wayne. And so we started with Southside High School here in Fort Wayne. And the whole idea of the academy, it's a 3-week experience in the summer for students where we teach them nonviolence, de-escalation, work on our trauma and inner peace. But then we go forth from the summer and walk with them throughout the course of the year to help them build peace in their school. And so this is the first year we have a few students from other schools, but Southside is still our primary focus right now. But this is the 3rd year that we've been doing this, and we never anticipated how fast this would take off.
Awesome. You got a couple of those students with us right now. And Samantha Morris, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're a high school student, and what got you involved with Peacemaker Academy.
Yeah, so I'm going to be a senior at Northrop High School. And what got me involved with Peacemakers was my dad is like a pastor at the church that is hosting it this year. And so I've heard like a lot about it through that and the impact it had at Southside. And I've seen a lot of like violence within my school and community, and I wanted to take Peacemakers to my school to help fix that and at least provide some relief for that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Timothy Poindexter, share us a little bit about your story, what you're in school, and tell us how you got connected with Peacemaker Academy.
Well, my name's Timothy, and I'm going to be a junior at Southside High School next year. And how I got introduced to Peacemakers was I have a friend who went to Peacemakers. He went to the academy a year before me, and he told me about it, and I was interested, so I started off by going to the club, and I really liked talking to the people that were there. So that's how I was introduced to the Peacemakers.
Well, Bishop, I know you had several things you wanted to ask these students and Angelo about here today regarding this program.
Just want to ask Timothy and Samantha, and maybe start with Timothy. Peacemaker Academy, I looked at the website and watched some of the videos. It says it empowers young leaders. I want to know how this experience is really empowering you as a leader, and maybe some of the backstory. How you've grown as a leader, and the benefit you see from participating in Peacemaker Academy. And the same question for Samantha.
Well, Peacemakers for me has definitely impacted me a lot. It's definitely taught me how to use my mouth instead of my fist to stop violence, Well, using my fist wouldn't stop violence, it would create more violence. So that's why I am learning from here how to use my words. Because this place, it teaches you that using your words is more courageous than fighting someone, and how when you talk to people, it can resolve more than what you would do in a fight.
Yeah, often it seems like a fight doesn't have a conclusion because, if one person gets the upper hand, then, nothing is really resolved. So it seems like Peacemaker Academy, in terms of empowering leadership, there's a process, and I know both of you have gone through, the various steps related to nonviolence. So thank you so much. Samantha, I didn't mean to cut you off before you got started. Go
Oh,
ahead.
you're so for me, I think it's empowered me to be a better leader in that I've learned to deal with a lot of my own like inner violence and trauma and things like that. So it's allowed me to kind of project that outwards to my family, to my friends, and hopefully to my school when we start school back up. I've just learned a lot about how to deal with not only the violence around me, but within my own life. And I think that's really provided me a lot of balance and peace that I can then like use within my leadership skills to help change the community of my school.
Does the academy provide an environment for you to share more of your stories or what you're going through? I know you mentioned, Timothy, you mentioned the club. Can you can you help our audience understand what are peacemaker clubs?
Okay, so after school on Thursdays, there would be a club in one of the classrooms where they'd have snacks. We go and we sit in a circle, and then they'd start off by ringing a bell to get us all calmed down and get in the mood to talk. And then they pick a subject and we talk to each other about it. And it felt like peaceful. It felt open because it felt like you were being judged. It just felt like you could actually talk to people, which does help. And I really liked it. It was comfortable talking to the other people at the Peacemakers Club.
Angelo, you've talked about what are the highlights that people, I know they have so many experiences. What do people come away from Peacemaker Academy saying, how this experience has impacted them, and how does this flow over into the school environment? Because I understand that you've got administrators now on board. People, this is kind of picking up steam.
Yeah. So the it's amazing how much we're able to fit into 3 weeks. um, we're in our third week right now. We have a couple of days left, and we are exhausted, but it's a good exhaustion. There's just so much. We have speakers come in. We had the deputy chief of police that came in yesterday. We do field trips. We went to Turner Chapel. We have a really strong partnership with them. It's the first Black church established here in Fort Wayne. It's an AME congregation, and learning the history about the AME and the history of that particular congregation here in Fort Wayne. We spent time at the rescue mission here. We ate with the residents, homeless men, and then learn from some of their staff. And there's just so much that we do in addition to the curriculum that we teach here. We're going to do an evaluation in a couple of days, give the students an evaluation of the summer program. But the first 2 years, all the different things that we do, what's come out on top as the highlight of the summer experience are the peace circles. And the peace circles, that's something that anybody can do. It is not complicated. It is, we start each day as Samantha said, in a circle, and we normally start off with a more lighthearted question, and then we go deeper. So I think on the second day, the deep question was, how have you been impacted by violence? And students don't have to share; they can pass. But on that second day, most everybody shared some really deep stuff, and that's what bonds us almost immediately. And of all the things we do, that elevates to the top of the list for students in the summer experience. Now, as far as how everything is going in the schools, that's what this is all about. There are lots of summer programs out there and all of that, but we see this as the launching point. So the Summer Academy, it's very intense, but it's really it's the starting point for everything else in the school. And over the past couple of years, what the students have been able to accomplish has been remarkable, and they are making a huge difference in the school. And I can list, specific things if you want, but it's catching the attention of the district to the point where, and the superintendent spent time with us a couple days ago. They're working on a referendum for the fall, and around district safety, and they're looking at weapons detection and some more resource officers and some other things. But they've added a line item for us because they want to see what we're doing expand into all of the Fort Wayne Community Schools high schools, which is huge. We saw that happening maybe over the next 10 years, 15 years, but to be happening right now is just a testament to the impact that it's having in the school. And the principal has spoken on our behalf, and the vice principal and administrators, and 98%. We did a teacher survey and a student survey. I think it was 98% of students and 99% of teachers, or maybe it was the reverse, that said that peacemakers are making a positive impact on school culture. So, I mean,
that's phenomenal.
we got to work
you know,
on that. We got to work
yeah.
on that other 2%, I guess. But
But it
You know.
shows systematic change, which is so hard to come by,
right, and
particularly in the interchange between, a kind of a church base or religion based thing and school systems and government systems and all that kind of thing. My goodness, that is awesome, isn't it, Bishop?
It is. It is awesome. Let me ask about the whole nonviolence training and the basis for it. Everybody, a lot of people were born after Dr. King was assassinated. So some people have little or no knowledge other than, maybe they heard the I Have a Dream speech and that there's a King holiday. But this notion of nonviolence, I think his last book, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, was Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? And it seems like there's a lot of chaos in our society when it comes to particularly gun violence. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and a lot of times the violence was really measured by it's and an occasional knifing and but now mass shootings is almost well, it is more than a weekly occasion. So tell us a bit about the principles of nonviolence and how that is translated into the curriculum itself. What do students learn?
maybe I should ask them what they've learned.
So we memorized the 6 principles of nonviolence as well as the 6 steps to nonviolence. And those really, I mean, I don't have to recite them right now, but they really taught me how to have nonviolence in a community in a realistic way. So it's not just some big dream that's way far ahead in the future, but it's something that we can start working on now and that we can practice in our daily lives, nonviolent way of life for courageous people. And that was one that we focused on a lot. That's the first principle. So really making it a way of life and implementing it into our communities is what I took away from that the most.
So what would be this is not a test, but sir, help us. What would be a couple other the principles, Timothy?
Well, the first principle, well, as Sammy said, the first principle is that nonviolence is a way for courageous people. The second principle would be the beloved community is a framework for a better future. The third principle would be
Attack.
okay, it would be attack forces of evil, not the persons doing evil. The fourth one would be, wouldn't that be accept suffering?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would be accept suffering without retaliation for the sake of the cause to achieve a goal. The fifth one is
Avoid
violence of the spirit as well as external physical violence. And the sixth principle would be the universe is on the side of justice.
Wow.
Good work.
That's-
Good work.
Not bad, Timothy.
rather-
When you put on the spot like that, my friend.
That's right. No pressure. So the principles are the heart and soul of the curriculum. And Dr. King, he first articulated the principles in, it's called a pilgrimage to nonviolence, and it was published as an essay, but it was also in his first book, Strive Toward Freedom, chapter 6, I think. So we learn about the principles, but we also learn the steps, the 6 steps of nonviolence. The principles are often referred to as the will, and then the steps are the skill. That's how do you organize a campaign? How do you go from gathering information to education and kind of go through the process to direct action and protest if that's necessary, but the end goal is reconciliation. So the principles and the steps kind of are the foundation, but there are lots of other things: de-escalation, learning types of violence, levels of violence. But this framework of nonviolence, I think, is the greatest gift that Dr. King gave us. We think about his achievements. And the Civil Rights Act, and the achievements that he was able to accomplish throughout his career, but the framework of nonviolence, it gives us the vehicle to continue to create change in our own lives and in our interpersonal conflicts that we have, but also in our school, in our community, and at the larger social level. Because when you talk about something as complicated as gun violence, we have to address that at the individual level all the way up to the political and social level, and nonviolence gives us the framework to do that.
Amen.
Bishop, do you mind if I interject something here? Just to
Sure.
I've just you mentioned Angelo and about the statistics about how 99% of the students and the teachers and the faculty in the school system say this has made an impact. This Peacemaker Academy has made an impact. I would really be interested in hearing the story about that, to see if there's actual stories that have come to life, either in your own life, Angelo, or in Timothy or Samantha, where they've seen that play out in real life. Either it might have been in the school, or it might have been at home, or someplace else. But I'd really like to hear from the students and for you, Angela, about any actual stories, how they've seen something that's happened in their schools where maybe there was a de-escalation, or maybe there was some different approach rather than violence. Can any of the three of you speak to that, please?
I can start. So definitely around Southside, I don't really go around the commons and stuff, but there's usually a bunch of fights that happen in the commons. But around like when Peacemakers started getting bigger in the school, more fights have been de-escalated by people. Instead of people watching the fights, people have tried to stop the fights before they can happen. So that's a way that I've seen the Peacemakers impact my school.
That's awesome.
You say the commons, is that the cafeteria, or is that a public space, or what's the commons?
The commons is like a big area around the school. It's like
Outside?
it's in the middle, I would say, around the school, and it's like where a bunch of kids come to congregate and talk to each other.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Samantha,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So there was a particular student when we at the beginning of this past year, the academy. This is a leadership program for students who are leaders. This isn't an intervention program. So these are kids that are already on a good path, but we wanted to work toward doing more intervention, and so we talked to the administrators about that, and they gave us the name of one particular student. They said this would be a good place to start, because he's having a lot of issues, and so our staff person in the school started building a relationship with him. And he was on house arrest and was really on the verge of getting expelled from school. And so started building that relationship, and ended up learning about all of this trauma, just learning his story, and seeing where that violence, where those issues were coming from. And that's something we're really big about, seeing violence as a symptom and really trying to get underneath that. And so we did that with this student, and within a couple of weeks, and we had people here at the church praying for him, and really started seeing some pretty miraculous changes. And he told us that he wanted to be a peacemaker, So we said, all right, well, let's start by squashing this beef with this other student that you have. And so we called them into a room together, and he took the initiative and apologized for his part in the conflict. And this was a really serious issue that could have really escalated. But they were able to squash that and put it behind them. And he's been part of what we do ever since, been part of our Peace Club. And, so that's just one example, one story, but there are lots of stories like that we could share. There's at the individual level, but also at the school level.
Samantha, how about you? Have you seen any evidence of this in your life or in your school?
So it's the first year that's going to be at my school, so I haven't really seen it within my school yet. But within my personal life, I've been able to like teach everything I've learned to like my family, use it in arguments with my sister. We learned affect labeling, which is basically ignoring whatever words are being spoken and like identifying the emotion and reflecting that back to the person and just saying, hey, I understand why you're upset. Like, this is what you're feeling. Let's figure out why and not yell about it. I've used that with my sister to kind of de-escalate any situation when she gets angry with me. And that's honestly helped us get along better within the past couple of weeks, I've noticed. Not that everything's perfect, but that's helped me within my own like personal, like family life. And I feel like I'll be able to use it within my school. I've seen like what impact it's had at Southside, and I hope I can do the same thing when school starts.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Bishop,
Well,
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, we often think of Martin Luther King Jr. as a civil rights leader, but he was a Christian minister, a Baptist minister. So I like, some commentary around. This is not. Some would say this is not necessarily totally new in that, in the what's commonly called the Beatitudes. Jesus teaches, blessed are the peacemakers, for they should be called the children of God. So what does it mean for us to, embrace this Christian principle and translate it into living it out, I'm wondering if some of what you're learning in Peacemakers, Samantha, for example, is that consistent with what we are learning or we should be learning or teaching in our church experience as well, and for all three of
you. At least for me, I would say yes. Like it really does align with like what I learn in church and like what I hear on Sunday mornings. It really does have to do with like like the love your neighbor, all that stuff. It's kind of based off of like Jesus' teachings. I feel like that's probably what inspired Dr. King. And I feel like it really is integrated with Christian life, at least for me.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. So I think that one thing that the church doesn't always get entirely right is even the concept of peace. Like, what is peace? And Dr. King talked about the difference between positive peace and negative peace, and that's something that we talk a lot about in the academy. Just not being violent isn't enough, right? So I think a lot of times we feel like, oh, we're peaceful, we're a peace church or a peaceful community because we're not actively contributing to the violence. But like Dr. King said, the positive peace is the presence of justice, right? It's not just the absence of tension. So I think that this whole idea of being a peacemaker, that's why we use that word more and more. I mean, we use the word nonviolence too, but we really like that word peacemaker because it's active. We are actively making peace. We're actively stepping into situations of conflict and violence and injustice, and making peace, sometimes causing conflict. Sometimes we actually need to create conflict in order to really get to the heart of the issue of injustice. And so I think that peacemaking is absolutely essential and central to discipleship, to this journey of walking with Jesus.
Mm-hmm. And creating, peacemaking also involves, and is a part of your mission, I believe, creating a beloved community. And certainly what Martin Luther King talked about. I know Bishop Trimble talks about that all the time, creating the beloved community. But that means creation of that means you're actively involved with getting things done. I'm reminded of, John 10:10 about the abundant life. The opposite of that is the deteriorating life. And so I've just theologically, I think there's some real good foundations for this. But can you speak a little bit to that? The creation of the beloved community is kind of at the heart of what you folks are about, Angelo.
Yeah, so I think there is so much chaos in the world and so much division, and um, we divide over around all kinds of different lines, whether it be race, now politically, the divisions that we have, the divisions that we've had in the church over theology. And so I think, beloved community really cuts through all of that, and recognizes the idea that we're all God's children. And how can we come together um, and create this beautiful thing together, and these pockets of beloved community. And that to me is where it's about, because a beloved community happens really in clusters, right? The larger you get, the harder it is to really have that beloved community, because it's about relationship. It's about being in tune with what's going on, with your sister, with your brother. I think of Acts chapter 2. That intentional community where they're living together, and they're living among one another, and breaking bread and praying for one another. No one among them had any needs, right? And so we see that happening here in the academy. Like, if there's something going on, that's why we wanted to keep it a smaller, more intimate group. I think Jesus was onto something. Jesus could have had 2,000 disciples, but he had 12 of his closest, and walked with them. And so when we gather with these folks every day, and we're sharing what's going on in our lives. If something happened in our home last night, we're sharing that, and we know what's going on. If there are any needs, we know what's going on. And so having this pocket of beloved community, and that's when we look at Southside, that's what we're trying to create, some pockets of beloved community. I don't know that you can have a beloved community of 2,000 people. Maybe you can, but if every student has a place, a corner of that school where they could feel like they belong, and have a group of students, and do that in a way that's not cliquish, though, where it's not like our group over here and your group over there, but and all moving toward a more positive, more peaceful future together. That to me is what it's all about.
That's awesome. Well, Bishop, what else do you think, or what are we learning here from Alive Fort Wayne and Peacemaker Academy, especially in terms of how this can be either an inspiration or a model for other United Methodist churches, our clergies, our community? Because there's violence is not contained to Fort Wayne, Indiana. We all know that, and not just the school systems there. So, Bishop, what do you think are some transferable principles or some lessons learned here that we can apply other places?
Well, I think of some of the sayings of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of them being that progress does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. It translated for me is that if you don't do something, you can't expect things to get better. And what I give thanks to Timothy and Samantha and Angelo and a whole host of others that are not on this podcast today is, they decided to do something and invest in it. Angelo could have brought the idea, and no one signed up. It wouldn't have made a difference. If students don't actually embrace it. So we've got to create the world that we want to have, the schools that we want to have. And it's not just on one person. It is, as Angelo said, clusters of people who can catch a vision and decide, well, I know one of the steps is you got to educate yourself and prepare yourself to do the work. So we really have to, I don't know, many people attribute this to multiple people, but they say, we have to create the world that we want to have. And I see that's part of what's happening. And I want to do a little game, if you will. It's not a game, but a one word, and get reflections on it from Timothy and Samantha in particular. So here's the first one: inner violence. When you hear that inner violence, these are things that I've heard said that are related to peacemaking. So, what is that? What do you think about when you hear that inner violence? What is that? Go ahead, Timothy.
Well, when I hear someone talk about inner violence, I think about the violence of the spirit, like what you're keeping inside, like something you're not talking about or the way you're feeling, and it's eating you up. And like if you keep your internal violence, like if you keep letting yourself attack yourself, then you're going to then you're going to unleash it and attack someone else.
Has that been part of your experience, and do you think that's common with other students or younger people, uh, and that they just never had a chance or a place to really to share their stories or that?
Definitely internal violence, big part of my life. And I feel that it impacts other people because people don't like talking to other people, you know. They think it's weak. So I feel like if people had something like this or if people were able to talk to each other more, I feel like it would definitely help a lot.
Samantha, inner violence.
For me, I think it can come in many forms. That could be trauma, mental illness caused by trauma. Really, a lot of things that cause us to bring ourselves down. And in that, I feel like it brings out a lot of physical violence or outer violence that like we project out. So I think that within at least my generation, I feel like Timothy you'd probably agree, like inner violence is like a really big reason for why we're violent externally. Um, for me, I know I've experienced a lot of inner violence myself, and I think Peacemakers has helped me work through that, but also to learn that I can't have that if I want to have external peace as well, which goes right along with I think it's Principle 5. I'm pretty sure, yeah. Um, so I think that when I think of inner violence, I just think of like how we can fix that through peace circles, things like that, to kind of help us get through that. It's something that like has to be worked through before we can have like true peace.
Well, let me throw another word, and Samantha, you can start and pass it to Angelo and then Timothy. Forgiveness. What do you think about when you hear that word, forgiveness?
Yeah, I think that forgiveness does have to do with inner violence because you can't really have that peace within yourself if you're not going to forgive whoever, whatever has caused you harm in the past. It doesn't mean that like you're condoning whatever's happened to you or whatever that person has done to you. It just means that you're going to accept that it happened and you're going to not really be angry anymore and you're going to kind of find that it's more about finding peace within yourself. You're forgiving them for yourself rather than forgiving them for that person. Like it's not a gift you're giving to them, it's a gift you're giving to yourself.
Wow, great.
Yeah,
Angelo?
yeah. I think it's something that you do for yourself, and I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings that people have. They don't want to give that to somebody that's harmed them, but it's like Dr. Lafayette, who I learned nonviolence from. He said that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die. Um,
Mm.
it's, but it's also a process, and a resource that's really helpful. We teach this in the academy is Desmond Tutu's forgiveness. And the first is to tell your story. That's number one. And then it's to name the harm, to consider forgiveness, and then to renew or release the relationship is the fourth step. But it's a process, and the whole tell your story piece, the first step, we had a whole exercise on that in the academy where after we asked how have you been impacted by violence, we then had the students write a letter to the person that caused them harm, and it was just a journaling exercise. But being able to name the harm and tell your story is such an important part of that. What can be a really lengthy process depending on the severity of the issue.
Thank you, Timothy. you hear the word forgiveness, and we talk about wanting to be peacemakers, and Angela talked about another student that they had to bring in to work out through something. What do you think about forgiveness? Is that something that we really don't pay attention to, or
Yeah, I feel like people take forgiveness for granted because they feel that they don't want to give the person, how do I say this? They don't want to give the person, like, make them feel good about themselves. They don't want that person to feel like everything's okay, like they're good and happy and everything. But forgiveness isn't trying to make the person that you're forgiving feel better about themselves. Is forgiveness is telling, it's like accepting that something happened and that you have no hate towards them. And it helps you because not forgiving someone eats you up inside, and when you're holding something in, it doesn't feel good. It makes you angry because you're constantly thinking about it. But if you can forgive the person who's wronged you, it's like releasing a weight off your shoulders.
That's
I'm gonna
awesome.
close my email. My
Brad?
email keeps
Yeah.
dinging on.
You're
Brad?
okay.
Brad, it's interesting because we pray that Lord's prayer frequently. I wonder, do we really pay attention to that core statement? Forgive us our trespasses or debtors, or forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So
Yes.
forgiveness is kind of a core center to that prayer that Jesus taught as a model prayer.
And I think that's an important aspect of that, just what Angelo said about forgiveness is really for ourselves. It really is for others.
Well, and I think the flip side of that reflection, when we think about how others have harmed us, is really doing some deep inner work, reflecting on the harm that we've caused others.
Yes.
And that's the other part of it too. And as we do that, that's a really humbling journey, because often we don't really sit with that, the harm that we've caused. And so that's a really important part of this process too.
Yeah. Well, Bishop, this is a conversation that could go on and on and on, couldn't it? And it should go on, right?
It should.
And it should. But let's conclude with this thought. The theme of the Bishop's podcast is to be encouraged. So I just really would like to hear what's encouraging to all of us here to conclude with. And Bishop, if you could conclude our time together here with you, what are you encouraged about in a prayer? So let's just start with Samantha. Samantha, what's one thing you are encouraged by as we conclude our conversation today?
I think I'm encouraged just by the connection I have with all of the other peacemakers and how much I think that we're going to be able to do just in all of our planning that we've done over the last couple of days. That's what really encourages me and makes me really excited for the future.
Awesome. Timothy, how about you? What's something that encourages you today?
I'm really just encouraged by the peacemakers in general. I'm encouraged that people can come together and work on making this world a better place. And I feel like the more peace makers we can have together, the more better that the world can be.
Angelo, how about you? Something you would consider something to be encouraged about?
I'm deeply encouraged by these two. I'm deeply encouraged by all of the young people that we're working with, that we've walked alongside with over the past couple of years. As we sometimes it looks like the world is falling apart if you just get on social media, and a lot of chaos. But they give me hope. Dr. King said the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And sometimes we have to put ourselves around hopeful situations and people, young people who are doing hopeful things, for us to be able to have the perspective to see that arc bending and then be a part of it. And Bishop has said this before, we got to be arc benders, and,
Yes.
and these two and the other students are bending that arc, and we get a front row seat. So that is deeply encouraging to me, knowing that they are doing the work that they're doing, and knowing that there are young people all over our conference, all over the state, all over the country and world, who are ready and willing to lead now. So that gives me a lot of hope and encouragement.
That's awesome. Well, Bishop, before you give your final comments and your closing prayer, if you will, I just want to give my personal word of thanks to Angelo and Samantha and Timothy from the from Alive Fort Wayne and the Peacemaker Academy. They sacrifice an important time in their schedule, their circle time, to be with us here today. And I want to give my personal thanks to them, show that I am certainly encouraged by your work. So, Bishop, a final word that you are encouraged by. Maybe you can pray for everybody involved here too.
I'd be glad to. And I would just make an appeal to Angelo, Timothy, and Samantha that when this podcast is published, that you'll have an opportunity to also to push it out and have people hear you on the podcast. We think it's part of leadership development as well for people to see and experience us on different platforms. I'm paraphrasing a paragraph from Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? Then I will close with the prayer. And I'm paraphrasing from Martin Luther King Jr. On chaos or community. Peacemaking is not something that we find, but something we must create. Peace. What we find when we enter these mortal planes is existence. But existence is the raw material out of which all life must be created. Listen to this. A productive and happy life is not something that you find. It is something that you make. Let us pray. Loving God, for the gift of encouragement, we give you thanks and praise. And for these who have given of their time and their witness, Timothy, Angelo, Samantha, we ask your blessings, and upon all of the students who are participating this summer in the Peacemaking Academy in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And for others who may hear this podcast, who want to be encouraged and encourage others in the work of peacemaking, we ask that you would grant us the power, the will, and the fortitude to do one thing at a time. Do small things with great joy. Bless us, O God, not that we might brag about our blessings, but that we might be instruments of your blessing, your instruments of your peace, your justice, and your love. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. And we thank you for joining us here today on the To Be Encouraged podcast with Bishop Julius C. Trimble. This is the podcast where we look to offer an encouraging word to an often discouraged world.
Consider yourself encouraged and appreciated for listening to Be Encouraged with Bishop Julius C. Trimble. Now, please share the blessing and encourage others in your life to listen to Be Encouraged. You can do just that by pointing your people to the website tobeencouraged.com. That's TOBENCOURAGED.com, or connect through Apple Podcast, where you can follow, rate, and review To Be Encouraged with Bishop Julius C. Trimble. When you do that, you're doing your part to bring a good word to a discouraged world. Remember to listen next week to Be Encouraged with Bishop Julius C. Trimble, and never forget, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it.